This is Data Citizens Dialogues, your guide to bringing trust to your data, decisions, and all things AI. For Calibra, I'm Thomas Brents. Data Citizens Dialogues. Here we are again, folks. As always, I'm your host. My name is Thomas Brents. I'm the Vice President of Portfolio Marketing here at Calibra. As you may or may not know, Data Citizens Dialogues is all about bringing you voices and stories from our customer community. And today, we'll be zeroing in on a conversation I had with the team at Western Governors University. We recorded this podcast live from the show floor at Data Citizens earlier this year. Let's listen in, shall we? Hey, Garth, thanks so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at your organization?
Sure. My name is Garth Gehlbach. I head up the Data Governance Initiative at Western Governors University. And we're a bit of an odd duck in the higher education space because from our foundation, we are an all-online school. So we've got 4 colleges, teachers, business, IT, and nursing. And it really serves this underserved population, working adults, those who might not be in the normal situation that you would think for a college student, right out of high school. So we get everybody else. And it works out great. It's self-paced. It's something that really brings the opportunity of education to a number of people who might not otherwise get it.
That's excellent. So all online, fully digital, people from all over the place. I can only imagine how much data that actually produces, right? More than a traditional school, you probably have just volumes that you're dealing with. So tell me a little bit about where your data intelligence journey began to start to get your hands around that issue.
Yeah, I have a vivid memory. Okay. My first month at Western Governors University, I was in a meeting, and a C-level executive put a full stop on the meeting. And she proceeded to describe her frustrations, ongoing frustrations, with seeing reports where it had the same metric, but it had different values. And she summarized her frustrations by saying, I can't trust the data.
Yeah.
In the subsequent months, I heard that again and again. It was a recurring theme. It was a common pain point.
Sure.
And a critical issue to solve. Now, in also those subsequent months, I heard other data-related problems that really kind of centered on us not being able to get our arms around the data.
What are some of those data problems that you hinted at?
Before we embarked on our data governance initiative, we were early in an implementation of a data lake. And that experience really revealed our lack of visibility and lack of understanding of our data. We suffered from problems of not knowing what data we had, not knowing where the data was persisted, who owned the data, how the data flowed from system to system, how it was transformed, what went behind the metrics, how to responsibly use that, what are the data policies. There's a whole host of questions. It became very clear that we needed a single source of truth for our enterprise metadata. Now, having a central repository of this information about data also enabled us to solve other problems, like be able to manage a logical enterprise data model, to handle master data management, reference data, a whole host of other things.
I would imagine that's probably your primary business driver for your data governance initiative. Were there other drivers?
I would summarize it by saying that our initial core use cases were around finding, understanding, trusting, and curating data. You can imagine that data analysts who were tasked with providing insights into things like what's the impact of our faculty interventions on student outcomes or student performance or student retention. They wanted to find relevant data that would support them in that task, but they were not familiar with the technical identifiers. They didn't know the thousands of columns of data in the hundreds of tables, in the dozens of data sources. They didn't know how to explore that and find it. Likewise, managers who were responsible for the information in reports and understanding the metrics that might be reported, to do their job, they had to deeply understand what that data was about, where it came from, how fresh it was, what's the quality of the data, can I use it with confidence? Not only to do their jobs better, but to protect the university with things like compliance restrictions, right? So any legal and financial and even reputation risks with that data. Before we had the data governance initiative, it was a scramble for data. And in fact, some of my colleagues at Ohio State put a good term on it. It was trick-or-treating for data,
Oh, wow.
which, unlike the Halloween version of it, doesn't always have a good outcome and can be, a bit of a waste of time. Very frustrating. After the data governance initiative and the implementation of a data catalog, we were able to have a self-service environment to where these analysts can go on their own, they can easily discover and find and understand that data, and even more importantly, how to responsibly use that data. We envisioned ourselves as providing the Google for data, but only better.
That's a change factor, right? It's completely different than the way they maybe had found or trusted or understand data in the past. Were there any points of confusion or challenges as you started to roll out the Google for data at WGU?
Yeah, some of the challenges were that it's valuable to find and understand data, but it can be challenging to find that nugget of relevant data in an ocean of noisy data. In the world of data, context is king. Nice. Right? So how do you get there? Data consumers don't understand the technical details of it. They can't find it when you're talking about it in schemas and that kind of information. They need to be able to have the context. So we were able to connect the data to context that's familiar to those data consumers, right? So we're expressing the context in those business terms, business initiatives, business processes. Where do you find it? Where is it generated? So they can easily get to the data that they need. You can imagine a data analyst who is searching for something on maybe student retention. And in other industries, this could be something like customer retention, right? So just entering in that word in our world yields a lot of results. You can find data, you can find reports, you can find analytical models that are relevant to retention. And what's more is that once you find that result set, if you will, you can see at a glance the rest of the context so that you can now explore, you can add additional filters to your search to further refine. I not only want retention, I want retention by demographics or some other factor that might be important to you and your project. You might think that this is a magical world that either is not possible or you can instantly get there, but one of the important concepts here is that it does require investment. This is something that's serious. You kind of have to build this enterprise of metadata that's interconnected, something I call the data context graph.
Oh, yes. I saw your theater presentation yesterday here at Data Citizens where you talked about this data context graph. What are some of the components of it, and how do you kind of bring it to life?
Similar to a professional graph or a social graph, the data context graph connects data, the primary element here, to contextual information. It might be useful for me to provide an analogy here. Please. So let's say that you are looking for a new job. Where do you go? Most of us go to LinkedIn, right? And we start searching there. The first thing that could happen when you're on LinkedIn is that they provide recommendations to you.
Right.
How do they know that? Because they store and use your professional graph, right? What experience, skills, interests do you have? Let's match that up with some of these job descriptions. What's further is that you can then, when you express an interest in a certain company, what do they do for you? They can show you who in your contacts are at that company. And what's even better is that they can provide people you don't know, but you've got some sort of connection with them. Who did you go to the same school as? Right. Who's an employee of this company? Who has same interests? Who worked at a company that you worked at maybe years ago? All points that are kind of connecting you in this graph. Similarly, on the data side, right, you want this ability to be able to explore and find connections and have the system be smart enough to recommend and steer you to data that's relevant to you.
That's a great analogy. They're quite literally making the linkage for you, right, with LinkedIn. So you're doing that at WGU, right, with this data context graph. What are some of the tools that you use on the back end for that?
One is that we have a data catalog, and you've got to feed it, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to establish all of this. And one of the critical characteristics of that repository is that it's got a flexible meta model, meaning that you can customize it to your needs, right? Any software vendor is not able to anticipate all of your needs, and your needs are evolving anyway. Sure. So if you can define new points in this graph, new attributes, new relationships, you can really capture the information and the contextual information that's important to you. And then the second part of that is to be able to provide tools so that you could view it in a natural way. You can search, you can filter, and then some of my new favorites are you can also set notifications, right? So if I have an example use case where I found the data that's interesting to me, now the system should be smart enough to tell me anything that's new that's going on with that data. Alert me when the data has a problem. Alert me when the schema has changed or the owner has changed or something has changed in my world, not with everything else, but with the data that's important to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It's every organization's different, so you need that flexibility, right? Otherwise, even if we were to just look at universities, right, what a traditional university might need versus someone like WGU that is completely digital, right? You would have wildly different needs than a traditional school. But yes. Let's talk about when you're finding data, what are some of the challenges that arise there?
Yeah, and finding and understanding data is like a necessary first step, but it is not the end game. It's not sufficient to get you everywhere you need to go. Sort of the next steps or the other attributes of this is, can I trust the data? Is it fit for purpose? What are the policies around it? What's the responsible use for this data? Mm-hmm. And fortunately, we can expand, and our vision for the data context graph included these elements of, I not only have to understand it and find it, but I also have to say, what are the policies? What's the responsible use? What's the quality? Is it certified? All of these, fit for purpose kinds of needs need to also be included and can be in the data context graph.
Well, let's take those attributes then for the data context graph of trust and reliability and responsible use, right? How does the implementation of the data context graph help drive those attributes home?
Reliability is realized when you have known quality and you communicate it, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't do any good unless it's out there and it's discoverable and you communicate it. Also, success in this area is when consumers of the data can use it with confidence. And how that's achieved using the data context graph is that we add in elements, attach it to the data itself, these measurements of quality, whether there's data issues reported against it, and if those issues are open or closed, sure. Right? The key factor here is that you're taking all of that contextual information, you're attaching to the data so that I, as a consumer of the data, when I've found my data and I'm tracking it, if you will, monitoring it, right? You're telling me, the system is telling me, what's going on with that data. Can I use it with confidence? If there's any issues, I can go right to it. I don't have to peruse some big repository of issues or look at some quality report and then kind of map individually here. Does it include any of the data that's relevant to me?
Right.
Start me off with the data I'm interested in and then tell me what's going on with it.
Yeah.
That's how you get to reliability and trust and proper use of the data.
That's awesome. And I would imagine, there's a lot of different approaches to rolling something like this out. Everybody's got a framework. Everybody has an approach to kind of get there. How does your approach to doing this in your storied career, how does that, kind of line up against other approaches?
So alternative approaches might involve a ticketing system. And that's nothing new, right? We've all experienced ticketing systems on one side of the equation or another, right? IT help desk, right? You report your problem, goes in a ticketing system. Those ticketing systems, though, are not oriented to data. Yes, you can enter in a title and a description and maybe some categories or whatnot, but it's still in this big old repository of tickets. I guarantee you that no data analyst or data scientist or data consumer of any kind, no manager, is going to go looking at that system to see if there's any issues against the data that they are interested in. With our approach is that we can associate those issues to the data itself. So, and we can notify and we can make it available with filters and whatnot to where that data consumer is only interested in the data set that's relevant to him.
Gotcha.
Right? So you can see at a glance then, do I have anything open that I need to be concerned about? It tells them without them having to try. It could also push to them, right? So I don't have to keep coming back to the system every day. You tell me when there's an issue. And hopefully it'll never come, but if it does, you're notifying me and I'm keeping abreast on how to use the data responsibly and understand and trust it.
I love that proactive approach. That's awesome. Why don't you tell me about maybe some other use cases that are being driven out of your data governance initiative?
Yeah, we can maybe spend a little bit more time on some of these others, but I really want to spend, which would include things like data products. We're using our Calibra data catalog to manage data products. We're also using it to manage our machine learning models. So in this, hype of AI, we do have, we are keeping up
Nice.
and using it for that purpose. But one of the things that I think is, kind of a big concept idea is that early in the implementation of our data catalog, I was pretty satisfied with how we were able to understand a current state of the data. But what I was realizing in discussions with analyst teams and with product teams is that they would identify needs for data that we didn't yet have persisted anywhere. And that typically was put in a document, put on a shelf, and then forgotten. We never got around to implementing it. And I think this is a common case in all kinds of companies across all kinds of industries. So with experience in product management over decades, and having specific experience with the software development lifecycle, I thought, why not apply that and those concepts to data? We should be able to manage data as a strategic asset through a life cycle, from capturing the requirements and inception, if you will, all the way to implementation, and then linking and being able to prioritize and coordinate it across the enterprise. This was a real key missing piece and one of the projects that I'm most excited about taking forward to really advance our maturity with managing data as a strategic asset.
Well, excellent, Garth. It's been wonderful hearing about your proactive approach, especially from a progressive university, fully digital, fully online, and with just a ton of data at your disposal, and what you've had to do to make that information, that data, trusted, reliable, make sure that it's handled responsibly. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for telling me more about the data context graph and spending a little bit of time with me today.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Talking with Garth was certainly a lot of fun for me. Being a digital university, it's amazing to me the volumes of information his team must have to get their arms around. It really paints the picture and illustrates the need for proper governance. Now, as we do with every episode, let's talk about my big 3 takeaways. First up, it's challenging to find that nugget of relevant data in an ocean of noisy data. We hear this all the time and everyone handles it differently. At WGU, Garth took a kind of a unique approach about building a data context graph that connects data with meaning, similar to how LinkedIn connects job seekers to job opportunities. Second, flexibility. Not all situations are the same, so your solution can't just offer a one-size-fits-all solution. We heard the importance of this from Garth, and I couldn't agree with it more. Lastly, finding and understanding your data is a great first step, but it's certainly not the end game. Trust. Trust is the ultimate goal. For Garth and his team at WGU, connecting data with context is what helps them get all of their constituents together. Team, thanks for listening today. I hope you'll subscribe and join us for the next episode. And for Calibra, this is Data Citizens Dialogues, and I'm Thomas Brents. Thanks for listening. Want even more insight into managing your data? Visit calibra.com/podcast for additional resources on the topics covered in our show. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Enjoy what we have to share? How about a 5-star review? At Calibra, we absolutely appreciate your support. Data Citizens Dialogues is a production of Calibra in collaboration with Stories Bureau.